Now, Egypt has 1/3 of all the people in the Arab world, so it's a very important country, and it's the keystone of the U.S. domination of the Arab world. And the U.S. is terribly frightened what's going to happen after Mubarak.
We anticipated that after the toppling of Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, for example, and Egypt is the key state involved, that when the elections take place and the result of the elections would be that the Islamic parties in Egypt would win by a landslide majority and Israel will be smiling. But the people of Israel are being prepared that Islam is rising and that terrorism, Islamic terrorism, is now going to be a grave threat to the state of Israel. And when Egypt actively supports the Palestinian cause, then Israel will say, this is casus bellum. This is justification for us to launch the attack that they've already planned.
When Egypt first set down the path toward democracy earlier this year, you remember there were lots of worries in the West that a group called the Muslim Brotherhood would win the most votes. Well, last week they did just that. But that's not what is terrifying liberals in both Egypt and the West. Instead, it is the unexpected success of a more hardline Islamic group, the Salafis, that people worry about. They reportedly won about 1/4 of the vote in the first round of the elections.
We found, as you noted, that the Muslim Brotherhood won a plurality, about 35 to 37% of the vote, and the Salafi group won about, called the Noor Party, or the Party of Light, won about 1/4 of the vote, and the liberal groups didn't do as well.
Why did Hamas win? Why did the Muslim Brotherhood get 1/5 of the parliamentary votes? Why? Because for decades they've provided schools, education, doctors, dentists, nurses, medicine, food. They've played pocketbook politics, and it works. And now the results are here.
Do recent events in the Arab world signal the beginning of a global Islamic power? CBN terrorism analyst Eric Stakelbeck thinks so. He says an Islamic party's victory in Tunisia's elections and Libya's embrace of Sharia law mark a turning point. He joins us now by Skype to tell us all about it. Eric, you've been warning of something called a new Islamic Caliphate. What is that, and why do you believe it's closer to becoming a reality?
Yes, Charlene, this is a term that every one of our viewers need to know, because they're going to be hearing it more and more in the months to come. What the Islamic Caliphate is basically, Charlene, a union, if you can imagine it, of every Islamic nation into one all-powerful military, economic, political force that would together take on Israel, take on the West. Now, there's some 57 Islamic nations in the world, so you can imagine how strong this so-called caliphate would be. The last time we saw it was in 1924. Now, why do I think that we're about to see possibly the reemergence of this Islamic superstate? Well, the so-called Arab Spring, Charlene, and as you mentioned, I call it the Islamist winter. In this Arab Spring, we're seeing in the Middle East certain secular regimes are being toppled and radical Islamic forces are coming to the forefront. We're seeing it in Egypt. We're going to see it in Libya, I believe. Seems like we're seeing it in Tunisia, Charlene. A radical Islamist group just won the elections there. We're also seeing it in Yemen. We could see it in Jordan. We could see it even in Syria. The regime there is bad enough, but it could be even worse if jihadis take over. So I think we're going to see a union, or we might possibly see a union of Islamic nations once again.
If anybody thinks that Khilafah can be established without the path of jihad is mistaken. Because Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu says, and we'll talk about his statement in his khutbah, وَمَا تَرَكَ قَوْمٌ الْجِهَادِ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا ذَلُّوا. Any people who leave the mandate of jihad are going to be humiliated.
اللهم انصرنا على أعدائك أعداء الإسلام. اللهم انصرنا على أعدائك أعداء الإسلام.
ثم عليك بهذه الطغمة اليهودية الصهيونية الباغية، اللهم لا تبق لهم من باقية.
When Palestinians voted for Hamas under internationally monitored elections, they weren't only voting for an Islamic government. In fact, many of those who voted for Hamas were Christian. What they voted for was full resistance to Israeli occupation and one Palestinian state in all of Palestine, from the 48 territories until the southern tip of Palestine.
حي رجال القسامية حراس فلسطين. حي رجال القسامية حراس فلسطين. أوتاد الأرض الآبية طلاب الياسين.
نحن نقاتل في ميدان المعركة بكل ثقة ويقين بالنصر وبدحر حثالة البشر من الغزاة الغاصبين. مجاهدون تملأهم الحماسة والشجاعة والإقدام لدك حصون العدو ولسفك دماء جنوده الجبناء. إنما نجح فيه العدو حتى الآن هو قتل الأبرياء، قتل الأطفال، قصف بيوت الله، قصف المقرات المدنية والشرطية والمؤسسات العامة. وهذا ليس إنجازا عسكريا، بل هو وصمة عار في جبين مجرمي الحرب من قادة الصهاينة. يا أبناء شعبنا وأمتنا، أن نواصل معركة الفرقان في مواجهة الحرب والطغيان. النصر لنا وهذا وعد من الله، والذلة والهزيمة لليهود الصهاينة.
يا جيش القسام تقدم خلف محمد ضيف. علم كل جيوش العالم درب العز كيف. يا جيش القسام تقدم خلف محمد ضيف. علم كل جيوش العالم درب العز كيف.
تظل إسرائيل هي العدو الرئيسي، وهي تعلم هذا جيدا، هي العدو الرئيسي لمصر لحد ما تخرج من كافة الأراضي العربية. القوات المسلحة المصرية أساسا معدة وتعمل في صمت، كأن الحرب مع إسرائيل سوف تكون غدا. أقسم بالله تستعد على هذا الأساس وفي صمت، لأنها لا نضمن. نحن نحترم اتفاقية السلام طالما احترمنا الطرف الآخر، ولكن نحن في قلوبنا بنعتبرها هي مجرد اتفاقيات ورقية.
That the latest developments in Egypt indicate that over time, Israel will find itself in a head-on confrontation with its Arab neighbor. Ben Eliezer of the Labour Party told the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee Monday that Israel should start preparing for a conflict with Egypt. Ben Eliezer told Yediot Ahronot that we are in the midst of an earthquake, and I still can't see it subsiding, definitely not in the near future, when elections are on the horizon in Egypt. Today it is clear that for the first time in history, the Muslim Brotherhood will win at least a third of the seats in parliament. Islamization is taking the place of nationalism.
ومن هنا أطلب كل قيادات العالم الإسلامي. Tüm halklara sesleniyorum. Ukatıp كل الشعوب. Filistin'in yanında olmayan tahlar dağlanacaktır. كل من لم يقف بجانب فلسطين سينتهي ويندحر.
فأولى بالمسلمين في أنحاء العالم أن يبذلوا من أجل استعادة فلسطين، وخاصة فلسطين ليست مجرد أرض إسلامية.
صحيح.
هي أرض الأقصى، أرض المقدسات.
Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "O son of Hawala, Ibn Hawala, one of the companions, if you see Khilafah approaching the Holy Land, Palestine, then the time for earthquakes and disasters and great issues is approaching. And the hour, that time, will be closer to the people than my hand to your head."
What we're dealing with here is potentially a global conflagration that requires constant diligence in order to suppress. What I need you to fully understand is that these people, they do not want to negotiate. Not at all. They want the universal caliphate established across the face of the earth. We take our foot off the throat of this enemy for 1 minute, and our world changes completely.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.